Oh, just good morning, everyone. Welcome this morning. My name is Nick Wong, and I'm the Research and Projects Coordinator with the Invasive Species Council of BC. The Invasive Species Council BC is a collaborative-based organization committed to reducing the spread and impacts of non-native species within BC. Just watching the attendees roll in here. So yeah, we're gonna get started on time. So I'm joining you here today from Coquitlam, and I'm grateful to live and work on the unceded traditional territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. So thank you everyone for joining us today on our third webinar that co-hosted with the Integrated Vegetation Management Association of BC, entitled A Story of Invasion and the Fight for Good, New Invasive Plants to BC. This webinar is approved for BC for one continuing education credit towards pesticide applicator certification. To qualify for this credit, you must participate in the entire webinar. We can figure this out, and including a quiz at the end, which we'll provide links to. The webinar is being recorded and will also be available for purchase through the ISCBC's Learning Center in May. ISCBC members and IVMA members will have free access to the recording, and everyone will have an opportunity to earn the credits if they watch the entire recording and the quiz. So the link to this Learning Center is in the chat box. If you have any questions about the credit, please contact Gwen Shrimpton at the IVMA, whom you'll meet shortly. If you experience any technical issues with Zoom, please fire a note into the chat box and we'll do our best to sort that out for you. And everyone's been muted here, so you should only be able to hear myself and the presenters. So within Zoom, you have the option to select speaker view or gallery view at the top of your screen, and we recommend speaker view. And finally, sort of if you have questions throughout the presentation, please type it into the Q&A box, which is different to the chat box, which is at the bottom of your screen. Becky will take time at the end of her presentation to get through as many questions as she can. If you do see your question already, you can upvote it and move it up the line. And if we don't have all the time to address all the questions, Becky has kindly agreed to answer those and send them back via email. So at this point, I'm pleased to give a warm welcome and introduce Gwen Shrimpton, the Executive Director of the Integrated Vegetation Management Association. So I'll pass it over to you, Gwen, and hope you all enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Nick. So as Nick mentioned, this webinar is co-hosted by the Integrated Vegetation Management Association of BC and the Invasive Species Council of BC. The IVMA is a recognized organization dedicated to the responsible practice of vegetation management throughout the province. Our membership represents diverse industries, including forestry, gas and electrical utilities, railways and highways, and invasive plant management. The IVMA is the credit coordinator for the Ministry of Environment continuing education program for the recertification of pesticide applicators for the forestry, aerial, and industrial vegetation, which includes noxious weeds categories. You must be a member of the IVMA for us to track your credits. Information on this credit program, as well as how to become a member of the IVMA, can be found on our website at ivma.com. We plan to enhance the opportunities for obtaining credits by holding webinars, and we'll be holding 4 webinars per year in cooperation with the ISC. As Nick mentioned, this webinar qualifies for 1 credit. I just want to emphasize that you need to provide us with your pesticide applicator certificate number when you registered for this webinar, and you must stay for the entire presentation, and we are able to track how long everyone has been online, so we can prove how long you've been online, and answer the quiz at the end of the presentation in order to obtain your credit. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter. Becky Brown is a professional agrologist with the British Columbia Institute of Agrologists and an invasive plant specialist with the BC Ministry of Forest, Lands, Natural Resource Operations, and Rural Development. She has been working in natural resource management throughout BC for the past 25 years, focusing on invasive plants since 2003. Becky completed her undergraduate degree in environmental science at Royal Roads University and a technical diploma in environmental planning at Selkirk College. Her primary focus is coordinating the provincial early detection and rapid response program for invasive plants. She also provides technical support to land managers working with established invasive plants in the South Coast region of BC. Becky is based on Vancouver Island. Thank you, Becky.
Thanks, Gwen. I'm just going to get us up and rolling here. All right, Nick, can you just indicate you can see the PowerPoint all right?
Yeah, we're looking good.
Great. All right. Well, let's get started then. So thanks everybody for joining us today. I wanted to take this opportunity to give an overview on a lot of the new species we're dealing with for invasive plants here in the province. I'm going to be focusing, I won't have time to cover all of the new candidates for eradication in BC, but I'm going to be focusing on those that are at highest risk of spread as a result of natural resource operations. I thought that might fit well with the IVMA theme. So let's get rolling here. There we go. Okay, so this is what we're going to be covering off. So here's what I'm hoping for today. I'm hoping that something that I say might catch in your brain, no matter what it is. And that it might result in when you're out in the field doing your work, your regular course of work, you might think, oh, wait a minute, invasive plants, right? Oh, this looks like a new plant. Oh, wait a second, I think I saw this in this presentation. You don't have to know what it is. If it looks new and you haven't seen it on the landscape before, go ahead and report it. The best thing that can happen is that people report mis-IDs and we go, oh no, it's not that plant. And then we get on with our days. It's so easy when that happens, but we want the reports to come in. So please, if you see changes in the landscape on the sites you're accustomed to working with, please report them. This is how we get new sightings reported. And look for changes in the landscape where you spend a lot of time. So some of the outcomes I'm hoping for is just sort of an increased general awareness of some of these new species, what they might look like, an idea of where you might find them, because I'm going to be telling you guys where we know they occur, a little bit about how these plants work, how they spread, how they reproduce, and then some of the risks associated with them. So the reasons why we care, why we're doing anything to begin with, and what we're doing about them. Those are some of the things we'll be covering off. So, I mean, here's just an overview. So I'm going to give you a really quick introduction to the BC Early Detection Rapid Response Plan for invasive species, and then a quick update on what's going on with terrestrial and aquatic invasive plants operationally. And then we'll really dig into the content here, which is about the species of concern. So I've broken them into three main groups: the aquatics, the grasses, and then other terrestrial plants. And then we'll talk a little bit about what you can each do to become part of the solution. So some of the sort of major issues we'll be talking about with some of these species include what's involved with early detection, pathway interception, what is that? Some people have asked. Physical containment, some new treatment methods coming down the pipe, and then treatments on and adjacent to private lands and waters, and how these relate to these candidate species. All right. Okay, so first of all, you're looking now at a picture of our EDRR plan for the province for invasive species. This can be accessed online by going to the link at the bottom of the page. I just wanted to say very briefly, so this plan it guides our actions in response to reports of new species to the province, new invasive species. And it takes us from early detection, confirmation of ID, confirming the actual extent of the problem and the regulatory status of the species, whether the response is going to be led by the federal government or by the provincial government. It confirms the risk as low, medium, or high. And then there's the forming of, if it is confirmed to be high risk and a new species to the province and eradicable, then there's a response team formed, and the response plan is developed and put into motion. And all of this can sometimes happen in a matter of days. That's the ideal, right? Or sometimes it takes a bit longer depending on when the reports come in. And then the final step is step 6, the monitoring and reassessment phase. And that's where we're moving into the stage where we're revisiting these sites, and it's no weed found every time we visit it. And depending on the viability of the propagules, the reproductive parts of the plant, that will dictate for how many consistent years we need to monitor a site before it can be declared eradicated. Within this plan, there is a real clear role identified for everybody. So everybody tuning into this webinar today, there's a role in there for you. And so I encourage you to have a look. It's a pretty easy read. And this plan has been tested over and over and over for, gosh, at least 10 years now. And it's working really well. And that's for all taxonomic groups. So that's really exciting. We're pleased with that. Okay, so what are BC priority invasive plants, these candidates for eradication? So some of you might have seen these slides before, and so I'm not going to be spending too much time on them. In a nutshell, when I'm talking about candidates for eradication for invasive plants in BC, I'm talking about terrestrial and aquatic plants that are known to be invasive and damaging and not known to occur yet in BC or present in very limited amounts. And it's this combination of factors that make it a priority and that make it eradicable. And so once a species is identified as a candidate for eradication, then we kick the EDR process in, and it pertains to all public and private lands and waterways. All right. That's all I'm going to say about that for the sake of time. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. Okay, so a quick update on where we're at with operations for early detection rapid response. For invasive plants, there are currently 47 species identified as candidates for eradication here in the province. For more information about the status of those species, whether or not they're present in BC, you can go to the link on the slide right under that first bullet. Of those 47 species, 46 have risk assessments completed. So shelf-ready risk assessments is really important for allowing us to maintain a rapid response. So we've already identified and confirmed the risk for a given species. We know how the species works. We know how we're going to have to be able to intercept. We know what the pathways are, so how those species are getting introduced to BC. We know how to intercept them. We know what treatment methods are available. These are some examples of the information we glean out of the risk assessments. Of those 47 species that have been identified as candidates, only 23 of them are currently present in BC, which is great. But unfortunately, that amounts to more than 350 sites already. The number of sites isn't as meaningful as the area impacted and the site types, but it's immeasurable anyhow. So of those 350 sites in 2020, 84 new reports came in and resulted in field verification. So this is really good. So we're getting reports in through iNaturalist. We're following up on all of those actually. We're getting reports in through Report Invasives. We get reports in through regional nonprofit organizations, through the Invasive Species Council of BC, through Front Counter BC, many different ways. And all of those, any reports that come in have to be followed up and confirmed to be that species or not. And then if they are confirmed to be that species, they then go into the operational program and there's actual a field action involved. Of the sites in the current operations program, 22 sites were declared eradicated in 2020. And this is really exciting because, as I mentioned before, we would have been monitoring these sites for several years, depending on the species. And so when a site is declared eradicated, this is a real achievement. And this is a testament to the hard work of so many people. So the provincial government partners with local governments, nonprofits, working professionals throughout the province in order to get this work happening. And so there's a remarkable amount of dedication by a lot of people in order to actually eradicate some of these sites. Of the 23 species currently present in BC, 2 of those are federally regulated. And so that means that the Canada Food Inspection Agency, the CFIA, is the lead and the province is supporting them in the response. One more thing I did want to say about that is, so as of the end of 2020, 89 sites have now been removed out of that operational program. The 22 that were eradicated, obviously, and then North Africa grass has been deemed no longer eradicable in the province and has been moved to a provincial containment species. And so that's resulted in 67 of those sites coming out of our operational program for EDRR. And now they're being dealt with as containment species. And I'll be speaking more about North Africa grass shortly. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to be talking about species of concern to the province, so new species, and I've sort of broken them into 3 main groups. So there's the aquatics, and these are the 5 main aquatic plant species that I will be speaking about. The province of BC has been actively surveying for these species and a wide suite of other aquatic invasive plants and native aquatic plants throughout the province in water bodies since 2015. And so this has generated us a really nice baseline. And that's our primary way of actively surveying and targeting strategically certain water bodies that we know are adjacent or associated with those water bodies that are already impacted. So the next group is the grasses. So on the far left, jointed goat grass, and on the far right, giant reed or Arundodonax. Those are the 2 federally regulated species currently in the province of BC. So the CFIA is leading the response to those. And I'll be speaking a bit more about the status of those shortly. And of course, in the center, the North Africa grass is no longer a candidate for eradication in BC, but it's an opportunity to share information with you guys. And so it's now transitioned out. So me providing the information on North Africa grass now is sort of my final involvement in that transition. And then there's many others who are going to be involved in ensuring provincial containment. All right, and the final group of plants that we're going to be talking about today are other terrestrial plants. There's another 4 there. So that is all I'm going to say about that. And I'm just going to jump into the first one. So yellow floating heart. Just checking my time here. There we go. All right. So yellow floating heart is native to Asia and Europe. It's a floating aquatic plant. Important to note that it roots to the bottom and it's a perennial, right? So this is important when we're developing a management strategy for it. We have to take into account how the plant works, right? What are the propagules? How does it reproduce? What's the phenology? Like, what's the timing of when it reproduces? How does it work? How does it do its thing? So a few things worth noting, and I'm not going to be reading the slides off to you guys. Some of these slides are put here for reference. So the main features for identification or distribution. I'm gonna try to augment those as we move through. So a few things worth noting here. It's got long branching stolons, which can be 1 to 3 meters long, that are below the water surface. So a lot of these, the mats are interconnected. It reproduces by seed and stem fragment, and each node produces a plant. So each node, like there's nodes all the way down the stem where the branching occurs, and you can get a plant at each of those little branches, each of those little nodes. And then it can reproduce by stolon as well. So this is one way that aquatic invasive plants are so good at what they do. They often have multiple modes of reproduction. In terms of identification, it's worth noting that the flowers are really a primary way of differentiating the species from the other nymphoides species. I'm going to move right on to distribution now. So currently in the province of BC, there are 4 main areas impacted or 4 primary water bodies. So our biggest infestation is in Seymour Lake up by Smithers. This is up until about 1.5 years ago, this was our only natural water body that was impacted. And so we've been working with stakeholders up there and contractors to attempt to contain this population. And we've been doing that through mechanical means, cutting and hand pulling at this point, focusing on the satellite populations and the high use areas. It is also established in a few ponds down in Van Dusen Gardens in Metro Vancouver. These, for all intents and purposes, are contained because they're man-made ponds. That said, though, a lot of people are seeing them, and so we don't want people to see them and go, "Oh, we want to plant these in our ponds." So the idea in the long term is to remove those out of the ponds as well. So we've been in talks with Van Dusen, and we'll be doing that at some point. But of course, it's less of a priority because those sites are contained. In the last year and a half, 2 new sites in natural water bodies have been brought to our attention. So one in a pond in Parksville, and this year we're going to be attempting to initiate containment and removal of those plants, and then also a slough in the Fraser Valley. So this is particularly concerning because when you see a species go from, okay, we think we have it contained in one water body in one region in the province, to all of a sudden it's in 4 different regions. Granted, they're just single sites in those 4 different regions. The concern there is, okay, how much is in between those sites, right? And how did it get there? So, I mean, and how does it spread, right? Because it can spread by water currents. So it is concerning that these sites have increased. And so the goal right now is to contain these sites and then reduce them. So I'm going to move on. So wall lettuce, this one's great because it's essentially, it's really nice and easy to identify. It looks like a floating head of lettuce, and you get a parent and then you get all these little heads of lettuce around it, right? So it's native to South America. There's a question about whether or not it's perennial. It's free floating, which is really cool. So that means that it doesn't root to the substrate. So if we have a water body where it has occurred, all you need to do is you go in with a net and you scoop out the lettuce head and you scoop out the stolons, and there you go. You put it in a garbage bag and you're done, right? You don't have to worry about the sediment. You don't have to worry about accessing the sediment or the water levels. You don't have to worry about trying to capture all these other floating propagules. So it's pretty nice and easy to manage. And we've had 2 occurrences here in BC, one in the Sham wetlands in the Fraser Valley and one in a detention pond in Surrey. So both of those sites have been removed. We've netted the plants. They've been removed, and it's been no weed found since those removals occurred. So we're in the monitoring phase with those 2 sites right now. One thing I did want to mention was, so this plant is thought to be not capable of growing below 15 degrees Celsius. So it's not thought to be capable of overwintering in BC, other than in, say, thermal ponds or around hydroelectric operations, something like that, something that would raise the water temperature higher than is normal. So we have no evidence of it overwintering yet, but we do have the 2 separate occurrences, one in the Fraser Valley and one in Metro Vancouver. So it got introduced there somehow. Probably somebody put it in there from their pond. They thought it looked nice, or they didn't want it anymore, something like that. We're hoping these cases are isolated. We have surveyed adjacent water bodies and have not found it. So that's where we're at with that. I mean, it is in the monitoring phase, and we continue to monitor. One thing that's worth mentioning, though, and this can be the case with several aquatic plants, is that water lettuce bioaccumulates heavy metals. And so, similar to yellow flake iris. So when you have a plant that does this, it's really important that that entire plant is taken out of the water system and not permitted to decompose, because if it's permitted to decompose, then you're going to have those heavy metals accumulating in the sediments, right? So this is something to take into account with the management plan, regardless of whether or not there are the propagules. Obviously, you want to remove those, the reproductive parts, but you actually want to remove the entire plant. I just thought I'd mention that because that's come up with some other species recently as well. Let's move on. So Brazilian Elodea. So this is possibly the most commonly sold and traded aquarium plant in the world. And as a result of that, it has found its way into a couple of water bodies in British Columbia. So it is a submerged freshwater perennial herb. It is rooted or can be free floating. It occurs in water depths of 0 to 6.5 meters deep. So this is important when you're identifying susceptible habitat or where you might find it. You can find it in quite a wide range of water depths. It reproduces by stem fragmentation. Stem fragments that contain a double node are capable of forming a new plant. So this is also important to take note of. In terms of long distance dispersal, intentional importation for plantings or unintentional movement on boats are the primary modes of long-term dispersal. So this is important to note because if you're taking boats in and out of water that could potentially be infested, applying the principles of clean, drain, dry are especially important. And those are described, there's quite a bit of information on the Invasive Species Council BC website for that. And obviously, we don't want people dropping their aquarium plants into natural water bodies, because it's so hard to get rid of them. It's best just not to do that. One other thing I wanted to mention, Brazilian Elodea is commonly sold under the alias of Anacharis. So these plants are not always properly labeled. And so as a standard practice, don't ever put your aquarium or pond plants into natural water bodies, please. And if you think you have seen them, please report them. One comment in general about aquatic invasive plants in terms of impacts is, so they typically inhibit irrigation, drainage, they can inhibit hydroelectric operations. That certainly is the case with Brazilian Elodea, and they can drastically alter the aquatic ecosystem, you know, and altering fish habitat as well. And we'll be talking a bit more about that, but just in terms of general impacts, they can completely alter the water column. Okay, so where's the Brazilian Elodea? It's only known to occur currently in 2 water bodies in BC, one in a slough in Richmond, and the city of Richmond has been working with us to help to contain and reduce this population for multiple years now. And then there is a lake in the Greater Victoria area that is impacted. And currently we're trialing different treatment methods in the slough in Richmond because we have the ability to do that because it's a slough. And once we find some methods that are really effective for a larger population, then we will hopefully be applying those to the lake in Greater Victoria. So right now we found that suction dredging is quite effective on discrete isolated patches. And I mean, of course, there are herbicides that can be effective as well, but it's extremely difficult to use aquatic herbicides in BC. So that's never our first stop. Flowering rush. So I could talk about this one a long time. This is a really interesting plant, actually, if you like plants. So this one's really interesting because it has, okay, first of all, flowering rush is the only species in the Botomus genus, right? It's quite genetically unique. And this is great and important because we're in the process of developing a biocontrol or biocontrols to manage this plant. And it makes it easier when it's so genetically isolated. So very cool on that front. As well, flowering rush has 2 growth forms. It can grow as a submerged plant and as an emergent plant. So these 2 growth forms are genetically identical. It's just the plant itself is highly plastic in the habitats it can adapt to. And so this is important to know because when flowering rush occurs in a manipulated water body where the water level can be raised and lowered artificially, that action of manipulating the water level can actually select for the flowering rush over any other aquatic plants in the system, because most other aquatic plants don't have the ability to thrive as both a submerged and emergent plant. You know, they can tolerate wetted conditions for a certain period of time or require wetted conditions, but not both, right? So flowering rush is a very interesting plant for that. You know, often in the extension material, we see this nice showy umbel umbrella-like pink flower, right? In most cases in British Columbia, there's no flower, which makes it difficult for ID, right? But that's just worth noting. Or you might see one flower and an infestation that's, you know, 10 meters squared and only the one flower, that kind of thing. So what you typically would be looking for, though, is an erect twisting spike coming out of the water. And then when you break that spike in half, you would see this cobwebby filament collecting or connecting the two pieces, as you can see in the image there. You'd see a very distinct triangular cross section to the stem. Those are really good features you'd be looking for. And as well, the root structure is quite rectangular. And there are these little bulblets that can occur at the base of the flower head and also at the on the root. And this is important because it reproduces very effectively through these bulbils. It can reproduce by seed, but not nearly as effectively. What else to say about that? I'm going to switch over. So it's currently located in 4 water bodies in BC, in the Caribou in Bushy Lake, and we've contained and are reducing this population through suction dredging and have been for multiple years now, seeing really nice results. So we're using a diver operated suction dredge for that. as you can see in the picture in the top center. And then it is in a pond on a golf course in Whistler. And we've been able to treat that site with Reward active ingredient diquat because we've contained the water body. And so we are seeing some reductions in that. Now, a challenge with the use of aquatic herbicides is maximizing your contact between the herbicide and the leaf surface. And in water, this can be quite challenging, and there's different ways to do it. But the nice thing about this pond is it's given us the opportunity to experiment a little bit with application methods. And we have a pond in a Japanese garden over in the Kootenays and then the Cusp area. Now, fortunately, that site was reported and removed in the same year, and we're now in the monitoring phase with that, and we think we've got all of it. That was just dug out. It was quite a small one. And then our largest site is in the Hyacinth water system in the Fraser Valley. So our focus on that site is to prevent it from spreading into the Fraser River. The picture on the left is our flags. This is our mapping of it. So as you can see, it can be quite difficult to identify. You know, once you got an eye for it, then you can identify it quite readily. But so in the lower Hyacinth Slough, which drains into the Fraser River, this is a tidally influenced area, which creates additional challenges for managing aquatic plants. So for the past 2 years, we have been manually removing the flowering rush from the lower Hyacinth Slough, and we believe we have prevented it from getting into the Fraser River. The Fraser River itself is not entirely conducive to flowering rush thriving because the water column, the visibility is so poor and the flow rate is quite high, but there are all of these estuaries and very suitable habitats from the lower Hyacinth Slough right down to the Fraser estuary. So we do want to prevent it from getting into there. And we have been actively looking for it in the Fraser downstream of Hyacinth for multiple years now and have not found it. So this is really encouraging. So so again, our goal for this year is to push the population up to where we have now installed a containment boom. And then once we have cleared out the area downstream of the containment boom, then we will be focusing on reducing the population in the lake. And so there have been many partners involved in this work, and it's given us an opportunity to trial many different treatment methods. And so I guess that there are questions specifically about the treatment methods that have been used there that I will address those, but we haven't determined specifically what we're going to be doing for this year. But I will mention actually, so there is a new aquatic herbicide that has been registered this winter, Habitat Aqua, active ingredient Invasive. This is really exciting. I personally have been working on this one for about 9 years, so I'm really pleased that this has come through. There's been a large team of people across the province, or across the country actually, working on getting this registration in place. We've been using Habitat on treating the Spartinas, the intertidal grasses, for 9 years now. And that's how this sort of registration came about. But on the original label, there will also be European common reed, Phragmites, and flowering rush. So does that mean we can just use this herbicide on these aquatic plants? No, it doesn't, not in the province of BC. So there's a variety of permitting that we need to get in place as well. But the herbicide now being registered is creates a tool that we, and a little bit less paperwork than we previously had, which is a good thing. So that is an option down the road, and we may look at using that product in Whistler this year. We'll have to sort that out. And down the road, potentially some of these other sites. But there's a good deal of consultation with the public that'll be required in advance of that happening. So water hyacinth, again, another really interesting plant. So this one was thought to be not capable of overwintering in BC, but it was found to overwinter last year. So we have our first site in a detention pond in Surrey, which I actually found by accident when I was removing the water lettuce. And so we're going to be doing removals on that this year. We've already done targeted surveys to confirm that it's not in adjacent water bodies. I'm hopeful that this is the only site. Water hyacinth, again, it's a popular pond plant, but it's not thought to be capable of overwintering. But with climate change, you know, we're going to be finding more water bodies that are maintaining warmer temperatures, right? Or, you know, if not the entire water body, then at least the interface areas, the margins around the shorelines. So this is a concern, obviously, right? Like we want to keep this plant out. We know that it's actively traded in via nurseries and horticulture, but we're trying to increase the awareness of people to ensure that they do keep them just in their ponds. It reproduces by fragmentation and plantlet clones. So you'll see a parent plant and then you'll see a stolon connecting that parent plant to a bunch of little baby plants, kind of similar to the water lettuce. So moving on to the grasses, jointed goat grass, as I mentioned before, this is a federally regulated species. So bringing this species into the country and moving it around is illegal. And the Canada Food Inspection Agency regulates that. So they are the lead in the response here in the province of BC. I'm not going to go into the identification of this species too much. I will say, you know, the information is available online. It's here on the slides. I will say, so jointed goat grass, it's a narrow cylindrical spike that you're looking for. And you can see on the right picture there, it's quite distinct, right? So you have these alternating spikelets and that are on an opposite axis from each other. It is often in the seed form, it's very difficult to differentiate from winter wheat, and it can hybridize. And you know, the good thing about the hybridizing is that the seeds resulting from those hybrids are typically sterile, but the problem is it can contaminate wheat, right? So obviously there's concerns with that. And seeds can remain viable after passing through cattle. So this is important to mention. So if you know that you have a site and you're ranging cattle on it, we would absolutely want to make sure that they're staying out of the infested area, because we don't want it being spread. And the bottom picture there on the left is the picture of the jointed goat grass, and on the right is the winter wheat. So CFIA has a good deal more information on this species than we do, and I would certainly suggest that you reference there for more information. We do have like a weed alert as well. If you think you've seen this plant, please do report it through Report Invasives, and then we will be connecting with CFIA on the response. It's difficult to control in winter wheat because it's genetically related, right? So, and the two species have similar growth habits, and they can cross-pollinate, as I mentioned. So quite problematic and a species of concern. So currently in the province of BC, we have 8 sites. So there are 4 in Osoyoos, 1 in Oliver, 1 in Penticton, and 2 in Christina Lake. So all of these sites were treated and contained last year, and I believe seeding was prevented. Seeds are viable for 3 to 5 years, which isn't that long, right? So you just have to identify the sites and contain them, and then prevent seeding, right? And so we're working on that. So, you know, of those 8 sites, there's only 0.6 hectares impacted. So these are very small sites. So we're still very much we're in a good spot with this one. And I will say, actually, there's one site in the Cowichan Valley that was introduced via rail, and that site is now declared eradicated, which is fabulous. So that was declared eradicated in 2019. New introductions will likely be associated with grain transport pathways, such as rail lines or long haul truck passageways, places maybe where truck trailers park to transfer. And we will likely see a natural range expansion coming up from the States via Washington, Idaho, and Montana. So these are definitely areas to keep your eyes on. And as you can see, you know, the sites that we do have along the border there are adjacent to those states. And the link to the CFIA website for jointed goat grass is at the bottom there. So Slender false brome. This is a perennial bunch grass. It is not a true brome. It is evergreen, so year round it stays green. It has a very distinct nodding form and very distinct fringe of fine hairs along the leaf and the culm margins, as you can see in the center right photo there. It's most commonly mixed up with native Columbia brome, which is less hairy. I think that's all I'm going to say about that one for now. In terms of identification, we're very fortunate in that Slender false brome is limited to impacting one area currently in the province, the north shore of Cowichan Lake in the Cowichan Valley on Vancouver Island. So it is occurring across approximately 32.3 hectares, which are spread across 62 hectares. Really challenging area. We have it from cobble substrate at the lake, moving right up into closed canopy coastal western hemlock. So it can thrive in open to completely closed site types. Once established, as you can see in the bottom right corner, it forms a carpet, displacing all ground cover and and potentially mid-story vegetation as well. So we've seen this plant or this grass occurring under sword ferns that are growing. Sword ferns are like 8 feet tall, and underneath at the base of them, there'll be these little slender false brome plants that are covered in dust, and they're there. Granted, they're not going to be as actively spreading as some of the more open sites, but the plant can occur and seed in these environments. So it's quite difficult to detect. We have this site contained, and this is a real accomplishment. It's been multiple years of really working at this one. So we have it contained. It's primarily being spread locally within this area by the resident elk herd. And we have confirmed that elk herd, their natural range is limited to the area that's currently impacted, which is really important because this means it's not going to be jumping into the other drainages via the elk, at least. So our focus with this one is to maintain containment and to shrink the population, which is what we are achieving right now, which is great. So we focus first on the roadsides, those areas at highest risk of spread and road grading, that kind of thing. And then we're focusing on the satellite populations on sort of the outer edges of the infestation, and then we're targeting the game trails, the watering areas, and so on, just to reduce the amount of seed that's circulating around. With this one, the seed viability is undetermined, so that means we'll probably have it in the monitoring phase longer than we would other species, just because it's not known how long the seeds can persist for. But at this point, we're achieving containment and the population is being reduced, which is really a positive thing. European common reed, otherwise commonly referred to as Phragmites. So this is another one of those species that's on the Habitat Aqua label now. Fabulous. So this falls into the category of giant grasses here in BC. So if you come across a grass that is about 6 to 8 feet tall or larger, just report it. Just report it to Report Invasives. There are some ornamental giant grasses out there that are not a problem, but they're often lookalikes with these guys. So please report your giant grasses. This is a very erect perennial grass. It can stand 2 to 5 meters tall. It terminates in a very conspicuous showy plume, right? That's the inflorescence. It has a very deep, dense rhizomatous mat and really far-reaching stolons. So the stolons actually can reach, as you can see in the picture on the right there, Mr. Dave Ralph, he's nicely demonstrating the length of the stolon. So it is, where I had it written down here. The rhizomes can be up to 18 meters long. I didn't write it down, shoot, sorry. Anyway, the stolons can be like this one actually in the picture is approximately 6 meters long. So it gives you an idea, like, I mean, it can spread quite far. So this site is down in the Vernon area, actually. We have 3 sites in the Vernon area. So a few things worth noting, a single rhizome can grow 0.5 to 4 meters in length in a given year, all right? That's quite a lot of growth, right? And then up to 18 meters. So they're quite far reaching. The inflorescence, it comes out in BC around August, September. And so this is when it's going to be the easiest to spot. So one really important thing to note here is with the Phragmites, there is a native subspecies and there is the non-native subspecies. So you notice in the slide here, I've said Phragmites australis, subspecies australis. This is the non-native one. So we've determined in BC that it is not reliable to differentiate between the native and the non-native subspecies by morphologic physical characteristics alone. So we've actually been confirming identity via DNA analysis since the beginning with this one. So, and I'll be talking a bit more about that in a moment. One thing to note, like for having a search image out on the landscape with this species, from a distance in terms of the grass structure, you'll see the comb, the stem is very erect. And then you've got like these almost 90-degree angles where the leaf comes out from the comb. So in terms of structure, it actually looks kind of like corn from a distance. I mean, it's different, right? But in terms of that search image, that's one thing. And in terms of the size and stature, that's kind of it's comparable. In 2016, there was new evidence of hybridizing between the native and the non-native, not in BC, but elsewhere. So our DNA analysis has not shown any evidence of hybridizing yet in BC, although there are a couple of sites that certainly raise some questions. So Phragmites, local spread can be in waterways. It can be just through natural expansion of the rhizomes and the stolons. But hey, with roadside maintenance, if machines are digging up these sites or mowing and carrying that material down the road, major source of spread. So typically we are signing these known sites and saying, do not mow, don't mow them, don't disturb them, because that's going to result in a lot of spread. And if you want to see what spread can look like for Phragmites, look at some pictures in Ontario. Kilometers upon kilometers of Phragmites down waterways, down roadways. They're doing aerial spraying of Phragmites right now because of how far it's gone. We don't want to get there. Okay, so really important that everybody does their parts. It's just a matter of practicing like the basic principles of good invasive plant management practices, right? If you know there's a site there, leave it alone, just don't disturb it. And if you have a disturbed site, a clean disturbed site, reseed it quickly and reseed it with good seed, right? Some of the common lookalikes with the Phragmites, one of the most common ones actually is pampas grass, cordaderia, which is an ornamental. We get a lot of mis-IDs with that one. No problem though. I love that because it's easy to deal with. And then also immature reed canary grass actually can look quite similar to immature Phragmites. Again, no problem. We are happy to get mis-IDs. Just report the plants if you're not sure. What to say about this one? Where it's present in BC currently. So we have to date sampled 217 clones in the province of BC. Only 9 of those have come out as non-native. So that means that it's very worthwhile for us to do the DNA work on this species. We have another 70 clones that I'm awaiting results on any day now, actually. And so currently of those 9 sites that are non-native, we have 1 site in the Greater Victoria area on a private pond. This is the only site that has variegated leaves, which is really interesting because it's come out as genetically identical to the non-variegated samples, but it doesn't look the same. Interesting. And then 3 sites in Metro Vancouver. We're making really good progress on those sites. 1 site in the Okanagan-Similkameen, that's in the Soyuz estuary. This is interesting because we sampled almost 100 clones in the Soyuz estuary. Only 1 came out as non-native. How surprising. So we actually thought that, well, I mean, what has come out in DNA as native Phragmites looks highly invasive, right? But it's not. So again, I mean, we're learning a lot about this species and the DNA work is absolutely useful. So in North Okanagan, in the Vernon area, we have 3 sites and then 1 in the Kamloops area. And so Kamloops is in the monitoring phase. We've got, I think, 1 or 2 sites in the monitoring phase in Metro Vancouver. And we've got all of these sites contained. So we're doing a really good job of preventing further spread. Our typical treatment for this species is foliar herbicide. So both active ingredients, imazapyr and glyphosate, are effective in treating this plant. So Arsenal, which is a terrestrial imazapyr product, can be used on some of our current site types, but with this new registration of Habitat Aqua, which is an aquatic herbicide, that gives us the ability then to treat those sites that are in closer proximity to water for Phragmites, if we can get the provincial permitting in place.
Hey, Becky, sorry, Nick here. If we can maybe give you 2 more minutes and then we have 10 minutes for questions at the end.
You're killing me. All right, okay. North Africa grass, thank you, I did ask for that. So as I mentioned, North Africa grass is not a candidate for eradication province-wide. The reasons being population distribution has expanded considerably in the last couple of years based on what we thought a few years ago. Detection is very difficult. There's an open contaminated seed pathway, so new introductions are coming in contaminated seed on a somewhat regular basis. and the local vectors are unrestricted. So the need to contain and mitigate this species remains very high though, because of the risk to rangelands and to crops. So our strategy is provincial containment right now. So the province is providing land occupiers, impacted land occupiers, with tools to detect and treat the species. So we're coming out with a grasses field key, treatment guidelines. We're hoping to work with the manufacturer of Esplanade to expand the label, which is a pre-emergent herbicide that's very effective for Ventonata. And there's mulching trials underway this year as well. So the goal is to prevent further spread out of the impacted areas. And as you can see, that's where it is. I won't have time to go too much into that. Giant reed, another giant grass that's regulated by the feds. Currently, we have no confirmed sites of the species, but we know that it's in the ornamental trade. So if you see this in your garden or someone else's, please do report it. It's quite important. More information about that. If you think giant reed can't be a problem, that's giant reed. And if you think that it can't occur here, this is exactly where it can occur here in BC. It is very tolerant to saline conditions as well. So not only are water courses and ditches at risk, but also our marine estuaries. So I'm going to have to jump very quickly here. These are a few other species that we're dealing with and we're having really good results. Black Handbane. This is where it's located, and I do apologize for not having more time to get through this. Perennial pepperweed. Note there are several lepidiums present in BC. The largest one, perennial pepperweed, measures about 1.5 to 2 meters tall. This is a really good way to differentiate, okay? And this is where it's currently located. We have very little of it in the province, okay? So it's very important that we continue to contain this. Mouse-ear hawkweed, again, okay. So Nick, bear with me here. So mouse-ear hawkweed, we're making very good progress in the Kootenays to contain it. However, the majority of it is located in Metro Vancouver of all places. And there is a lot of opposition to the use of herbicide there. And so we have not been able to treat it in Metro Vancouver for multiple years. So there's a total of 50 hectares of mouse-ear hawkweed in Metro Vancouver right now. That's 88% of the total mouse-ear present in BC. So we're working with the local governments there to establish some tolerance for herbicide, but we need to work with the public more obviously in that as well. So we're making great progress elsewhere in the province, but that is a source of frustration, absolutely. Final one, Nick. Shiny geranium. So this is a winter annual. It is limited to southwestern BC right now, but it is on the move. So just in this last year, 3 new sites were found in Metro Vancouver. So we thought prior to that it was limited to Salt Spring Island and the Greater Victoria area. And there were 2 sites that were treated and are in the monitoring phase up in the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island. So with these 3 new sites in Metro Vancouver, that tells us that it's out there, right? It's being circulated. This plant is not actively traded for its own virtues, but the seeds contaminate potting mediums. And so it is the seeds are inadvertently spread in other plants, other potted plants, largely by some to nurseries spreading it unknowingly, but largely from people trading plants. So don't trade plants if you know your soil has weeds in it. Just keep them to yourself. You're not doing anybody a favor if you're spreading them around. So we have multiple treatment methods that we're using that are very effective. We've introduced steam treatments this year that have been highly effective as well. That's all I'm going to say about that. This slide is about doing your seed analysis to make sure you don't have contaminated seed before you have it mixed, okay? You can reference that later on. And there's a link there for exactly how to do that. Very important. What can you do? Please report invasives. If you're not sure, report it anyway. We love to get mis-IDs. As I said, they're the easiest thing to manage. Learn where new invaders are in your area. Use best practices to avoid spreading invasive plants, please. Plant non-invasive plants and just stay informed. And so obviously by being on this webinar, that's one way that you can stay informed. Real quick, I'm sorry, Nick. Real quick. So IAP, the Invasive Alien Plant Program, is our current provincial database and mapping system for invasive plants. That is going to be replaced this year by Invasives BC. So more information will be coming on that. Training will be required in order to use this system. It's going to be a really good system. And I know many of you online here have been involved in the development phases of this system. New information system coming online this year. For more information, you can contact our program on that. Thank you very much. So in a nutshell, BC Early Detection Rapid Response, invasive plants. I gave you a rundown on where we're at. Talked about more species than I probably should have that are currently in the program, and then how you can be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Becky. I would love to have 2 more hours to read
No,
through
you wouldn't.
this. So we'll have to sign you up again. And I'm really excited to see the invasive species stuff. So we have a couple minutes for questions, but I also want to take time to make sure we share all the links for the quiz. So again, if you see any questions in the Q&A box, upvote those. So we're also going to share the quiz and the link. So you must complete the quiz to gain your continuing education credits. So it'll be up on the screen eventually here. You'll be able to use the link in the web browser or use the QR code and scan it with your phone, and then you can just complete it quickly there. So yeah, so I'll just start with the first question here, Becky. How do you safely dispose of a plant that bioaccumulates heavy metals?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know what? I mean, so with any invasive plant, you have to check in with your local government, the regional district primarily, right, for what the rules are at the landfills. So landfilling an invasive plant isn't necessarily the only option. I mean, there's other options too. What you want to do is understand how the plant reproduces, so you can ensure that those reproductive parts aren't being circulated after you dispose of it, right? So some species, you can just put them high and dry and leave them to desiccate, right? But with a plant that bioaccumulates heavy metals, I mean, wherever you put that plant, those heavy metals are going to go, right? And so you need to connect with your regional district about what's allowable in the landfill, or maybe they have a particular pod within the landfill area where they allow those types of materials. I mean, it depends on the heavy metals too, and it depends on what your volume is. I mean, obviously, like if you had like many square yards of heavy metals, then you might be talking about contaminated material, right? And then it might have to be different again. So yeah, connect with your regional district and get guidance from them on the best way to deal with that. I mean, if you have a very large amount, you'd have to connect with the Ministry of Environment with their contaminated sites folks. Don't leave it in the water though, and don't put it up on the shore, because then your heavy metals are just going to leach right back into your water if you want to actually remove the metals from that water body.
All right. Okay, next one. What kind of regulations are in place when it comes to nurseries selling invasive species such as water hyacinth?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's a point of frustration, absolutely. So several years ago, we identified the need to update the Weed Control Act legislation in order to strengthen our ability to prevent the transport and the sale of noxious weeds. And so that legislation has not been updated yet. We're waiting for some political interest in that. But there's absolutely a need for that. So currently, regulated noxious weeds cannot be spread off of a land occupier's property. So there is some question about whether that could be extended to nurseries or interpreted to include nurseries. I'm not, Val Miller, if she's on here, she might be able to speak to that a bit better than myself for where things are at with that. But typically we're going for voluntary compliance. And you know, typically we get it, but there have been some challenges for sure, and it would be nice to have stronger legislation to support that.
Definitely. Okay, so I think the next two questions are pretty related to that one. Would you say that online sales are a source of spread for aquatic species?
Not exclusive to aquatics. I mean, all kinds of invasive plants are being sold online, and it's challenging, right? Because we can't even the feds can't necessarily regulate that, right? I mean, they can regulate ports of entry, but they can't actually prevent somebody from out of country from selling something in here, right? In Canada. So so that is challenging. Absolutely, online sales are a source of new introduction to the province and the country. Yeah.
Well, just being cognizant of time, there are 14 more questions, but Becky did say she'd happily provide responses to those. So I'm afraid we'll have we'll have to pause on those. But I'd just like to close by thanking you so much, Becky, for sharing your expertise today, and thank you as well to Gwen, and on behalf of the ISCBC and the IVMA, and to all those that are listening, thanks so much. We'll also be sending out a short evaluation survey to all the participants, so you can please fill that out. And reminder, please do that. Please fill out your quiz, or Gwen will be or Gwen will be after you. If you're not a member of IVMA or ISCBC, please visit the links in the chat to learn more. So yeah, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day and enjoyed the webinar today.
Thank you.